All right. Welcome, guys. I am excited today. We're going to have a great show. I have Sheriff Brian Kirkland. He is currently the Swain County Sheriff in Swain County, North Carolina, over here on the western side of the state. So it's going to be a great hour, great conversation. And as always, let's give you a proper welcome to the show.
Welcome to Beyond the Glitch, the podcast where we expose the darkness behind the issues affecting our lives and bring truth, hope, and healing into the light. From addiction and mental health to culture, faith, and the stories people are afraid to tell, nothing is off limits. I'm Jason Tremco, and together, we're going beyond the glitch.
All right. So, welcome to Beyond the Glitch. I am your host, Jason Trimco, and I'm also a resident and local from Western North Carolina as well. So, just recently, I've had the opportunity to meet Sheriff Kirkland, and it's just been an honor. He's a great guy, and just has great motivation and truly cares about his community. And I'm very excited to hear what he has to say. We're going to try to offer a unique perspective from law enforcement, and I don't think there's a better person that we could have to discuss that. He was a graduate in 2000 from the BLET course, and he's been doing law enforcement pretty much his whole life. So he's a little bit older than me. I'm 43. He's 46, and just dedicated his whole life to serving his community, which is great. And his priorities. I was reading about some of his priorities, and they are the safety of the community and to you know basically police by having good relationships in the community, which is awesome. I think that's something that people underestimate. Most officers that I've met truly care about their community, and that's outstanding. So, without further ado, I am going to bring him onto the show. All right. Hello, Mr. Kirkland. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. So, first time I met you, I kind of told you, about what my work is and what I do and things like that. And you actually told me, hey, I'd be very interested to be on the show. So I thought that was really cool. So what brings you on the show today?
Well, I think one of the things that we have in common, Jason, not only was I never served for our country. I stayed, in here and served at a local capacity, and but your passion against, for the drug education, we share that same belief. Really, really heavy.
Absolutely. So, um, Western North Carolina. You've been the Swain County Sheriff for how long now in total?
It's been a year now.
Year. Okay. Good. How's that experience going for you so far?
It's different.
Yeah.
The work is really no different from what I've ever done before.
Yeah.
I think it's more or less the attention that comes with the work now. Gets it's different.
Yeah. So, it seems like, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but in Western North Carolina, people seem to have a pretty good respect for law enforcement, I would say. I know it varies, different parts of the country. I was a military recruiter in San Francisco, California back in 2005, and that was right during the middle of the Iraq war surge. And I'm going to say people didn't really care too much for military presence, So, we had a lot of opposition and stuff out there. And I know it's the same thing in certain parts of the country with law enforcement, but um, I feel like Swain County is a pretty good place. I think people have a lot of respect for law enforcement. Am I correct on that?
I believe we live in the best community in the world right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I was born here back in 1980, and I spent my whole life here. I never wanted to leave just for you know how caring this community is. And you're right that we still live in a place where people really respect what we do for a living.
Yeah. That's awesome. Something I don't take for granted. Every time I leave the area, I can't wait to get back up here to the mountains again. Just I love it. But so tell us a little bit about what led you to become law enforcement.
Well, growing up, I was just an average child. Loved the outdoors. Loved sports. I played football. I played baseball. You know, a little competitive by nature still, but I always said when I got probably my junior, senior year in high school, I was either going to join the military or I was going to get law enforcement. Obviously, you see, I decided the law enforcement side. I had several family members that did join the military, and at first I had a passion to join the highway patrol. You know, Goals change over a little bit of time, but I
Yeah.
decided to go through basic law enforcement in 2000 on my own. I wasn't guaranteed to work nowheres when I went on my own. And I was fortunate enough to get picked up by Sheriff Ogle. He was the previous sheriff here, and gave me opportunity to get my start on patrol as a deputy. And I was honored enough to go to work for the Cherokee Indian Police Department back in 2004, where I ultimately made their traffic team. Of course, I worked a lot of wrecks and you know responded to a lot of traffic related calls. And I eventually moved my way into investigations, where I learned a lot with major crimes, work murders, and different assaults and larcenies. I worked a little bit of everything, and then I had the opportunity to come back in administration, and I started that in 2011, I believe. And
Nice.
I worked my way up to chief deputy, and now here I am.
There you go. Good stuff. Well, thank you for your many years of service. That's awesome. So, what does the average person kind of misunderstand about the job of a sheriff?
Uh, as a sheriff, I think I'm more like a person that tries to get out here and work on partnerships with other agencies. I try to meet with the community and explain sort of our vision of where we're going with the office. I'm a very community related guy. One of the first things I did was start putting our guys back into the residential areas, and protecting our homes and our property. And you know I look at law enforcement like a partnership. I've got a group of guys that work drugs every day and are very aggressive, and then we've got our patrol guys that answer calls. But I think visibility is the deterrent to crime.
Hmm.
So we spend a lot of times in the community. I created a community impact team that that's what they do. They patrol their communities. They get out and talk with people, and that we gather a lot of information that way. We find out where issues are going on. I mean, there's no better eyes in a community than the people that live there. They know who
Yeah.
belongs there. They know who don't belong there. They see somebody pulling into the neighbor's driveway. They know the neighbor's on vacation for the week. And ain't nobody supposed to be here.
Hmm.
They know the call. When
Yeah.
we're driving up the road, we might not necessarily know that the neighbor there didn't buy a new car, and not know who it is. But that partnership with our community makes a big difference because it
Yeah.
helps us bring crime rates down.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's very important, because you see certain parts of the country where people try to, instead of work with the local law enforcement, they work against them,
Right.
and to me, I'm like, that just doesn't help. That's not what you guys are there to do. You're trying to help the people, help the community, so um, yeah, so that's awesome. All right, so what has been some of the most rewarding parts of your career so far?
Uh, Trying to make a difference, feeling like you're making a difference. I'm also a stat person. I looked at the stats from the 24 to 25 year frame. We answered 10,000 right at 500 calls that year.
Wow.
I looked at the stats from July 1st to 25 through right at July 1st to 26. And our calls had dropped under 10,000, was in the 9,000 range. And I truly contribute that to our community programs, that we're being more, we're being out in the communities more in these residential neighborhoods, and just the visibility itself is dropping the crime rate.
That's good.
Our drug arrests are going up. Of course, I contribute that to being able to modernize a little bit. We've started a K9 unit here, which has been extremely successful. Our partnerships with our neighboring agencies, we're sharing information, and getting to know who the people are that's coming and going, that's bringing these types of drugs into our community, has been a really good plus too for us.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned stats. I'm a big stats guy as well. So, obviously, you've seen my work and stuff with my book and everything. So, stats to me are important. While it may not be the end all be all, it really is a guide that we should pay attention to and follow and care about, because it helps us come up with a good plan. You got to peel back the onion and problems to make things better, and sometimes people are scared to do that, which actually leads me to my next question about leadership. You're a great leader. So, in your opinion, what does a good leader look like in law enforcement?
Well, I think what helps me is I've been there and I've done that.
Hmm.
I started at the very bottom, so I understand what it's like to get a tasked with a duty for the day that ain't necessarily the most funnest thing you've ever done.
Hmm.
You know, I've been in most situations over my years. I've seen a lot of different things. So I do have an understanding what these guys go through. I try to. One thing that we really pushed for our deputies is be able to get them more training, and we're fully staffed for the first time in years, and I've been pretty much fully staffed for the last year.
That's
And
awesome.
it gives more people opportunity to take a little bit more time off and spend time with their family, but it also gives us more manpower when it comes to doing operations and working. And if you send your guys to training and things that's going to benefit them in the job they're doing, I try to take care of my deputies and treat them good, because I truly feel like happy workers do happy work, which give you happier results.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. And yeah, I mean, you want people to want to work where they are, and that's awesome. So, um, sending them to training and things like that, and I'm sure law enforcement is kind of like the military. It comes in waves. You got good times, you got bad times,
Yeah.
So when things are difficult, so to speak, or maybe your priorities are a difficult focus, how do you keep your guys motivated? How do you keep your team motivated?
It's just we appreciate the work they do. We let them know how much we thank them for their work. We brag on them out here in the community, and we're constantly asking them, hey, what can we do to make things better as leadership?
Hmm.
I feel like I've built a really good team of leaders beside me. And one thing I've realized too, it's not one person that's going to do it. It's a teamwork, and it's
Hmm.
about making a team.
Yeah. So my nephew, he started as a city cop. I believe he was in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, but he just converted over to become a sheriff, and I mean, he absolutely loves it. A lot of good leadership, and that's good to see. So keep up the good work on that. You got a fully staffed department. That's awesome. So keep up the good
But,
work, sir.
I think modernization and giving the guys the tools they need to do their job makes a big difference too.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Yep. Um, I 100% agree on that. So you know, let's say, if somebody's interested, like my son-in-law, he's getting out of the Marine Corps, going to be looking for some work soon. Uh, I told him the other day, they were visiting from California. I said, you ought to look into law enforcement, because I know you were telling me there's a couple of positions available out there in, um, is it Bryson City? Bryson City has some positions
yeah,
available.
Bryson City's got several openings,
Yeah.
and
I
are
said,
looking for help. And that's a great place to get started too.
yeah, I told him, I said, man, you ought to go look into doing something like that. But let's say when you're interviewing somebody or looking to hire a new deputy, what characteristics are you looking for? What qualities are you looking for?
Well, I mean, first you want to make sure that they've made proper choices in their life.
Hmm.
Nobody's going to be perfect.
Hmm.
We understand that, but we got to make sure we can get them through a background and the psychological exam, and we got to look to see they're teachable.
Yeah.
If they already know it all and they're stubborn, then they're probably not a good fit here, because
Right.
we want people that we put on a really good field training program here. It's usually 12 weeks long, sometimes a little longer,
Hmm.
and you know, but we've got a really big family atmosphere within the office. We're all brothers and sisters, and we treat each other like family.
That's
We
cool.
may not always agree, but we'll sit there and work things out pretty much,
Yeah.
and it's over, and we're back to loving each other a minute later. So that
So what?
family atmosphere is also a big benefit here.
Yeah, definitely. So what? What's the longevity of law enforcement? It seems like most of the officers I know, they stick it out for a pretty long time.
Well, I mean,
Um,
the way the retirement system works, the state has passed a pretty good law enforcement retirement.
mhm.
Because we get a separation allowance once we made our time. But I mean, it's 30 years or or you got to have 25 at 55 at the age,
Mhm.
or 55. Once you reach the age of 55, you can draw a retirement, but a
Awesome.
really livable retirement, you just about have to have 30,
Yeah. So
30
you're
or at least 25 and 55.
yeah. So you're getting close to that 30 years. You gonna stick it out a little bit longer?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. Sometimes I wish I would have stuck it out in the military a little bit longer. I did 20 years, 5 days. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I would have stuck it out about 30 or something. Um, but it gives me time to do this kind of stuff. So I enjoy that. Um, so we originally met through the Green Glitch project that I'm working with here, and I'm excited. I'll actually be coming out there to Swain County to talk about some of the stuff. But from your experience, how has drugs changed over time in your community? In your county.
I mean, so one thing I've learned about drug abuse, it every family around it, has got some family member or friend that's dealing with some type of substance abuse.
Seems
I
that
mean,
way. Yeah.
it's obvious. Everybody around can say, "Hey, I know somebody," or "I've got a family member that's addicted to drugs."
Yeah.
We see how drugs destroy families. You know, you've got family members begging, come, even speaking with us, trying to get help for folks. But only thing I've come to realize through this, because I'm huge on the educational piece. I've got a very aggressive drug narcotics division and interdiction type guys that do the work and are very aggressive. But on the back end of this, we're really big in drug education and trying to offer things to try to get people off drugs.
Yeah.
We've started programs in our jail that's never been done before. Because the reality of it is, if somebody does come to our jail, we hope they never come back. We
Yeah.
don't want them to come back.
Right.
We want to offer them the tools that they need to have the resources once they get out, where they don't have to go back to the same environment they're in. They've got somebody they can call, and through some of these networks we brought into our jail now, there's possibilities for long-term treatment plans and halfway houses if they successfully complete that.
Yeah.
And,
I think
you
that's so important. And I wrote about that, in my book too, based off some of the research and stuff that I've came across, but I feel like it's so important that we do that, because in my experience working with, 12-step programs and things like that, I've come across a lot of people who did time in jail, and that's kind of where the positive change happened for them. They got educated. A lot of them, found Christ in there. Um, started going to church or whatever, and just headed in a positive direction. So I think that's so important to use that as an opportunity to kind of reach people. It ain't just like, hey, we're gonna lock you up and forget you. We're here to help you become a better person. So that's great. Now I don't know about other communities and stuff, but how do you feel? Let's say nationally or state level, we're doing in those capacities.
what do you mean as far as like treatment programs?
Yeah, or just helping people when they're in jail. Helping them to
Well,
get on the straight and narrow.
I feel like obviously the people that end up incarcerated, they're the ones that probably need the help the most.
Mm,
You know, and like for us, we brought in a peer support group.
hmm
Which the peer support group, what's good is because the people that do the peer support, they've been there and done that. They've spent their own time in jail. They have their own issues, and they beat it. They beat the narcotic urge, and I think for them, I think the trying to educate people and give their story and explain that they can change is what motivates them not to reuse or
Yeah,
fall back in that same trap.
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
we all, and this is just my personal opinion, and you may look at it completely different than I do, but I feel like a lot of people, when they come to jail, they sober up.
hmm
You know, once you get to know them as a sober person, they're really, really good people.
Yeah, yeah.
And when they get out, they have nowhere else. They feel like they have nowhere else to turn but to where they just come from, or to their old friends,
hmm
or their old family, and it's all in their face. And I mean, I can
Yeah,
imagine how difficult it'd be if you've already got the urge when you see it, and it being in your face constantly, not to just fail again.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was researching. Um, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was 45% of people who, with marijuana rehab and recovery anyway, about 45% of people relapse the very first time that the drug is offered to them. And I'm sure it's the same thing with, alcohol or, harder drugs and things like that. So, you know, what advice do you give to families or, just people in the community to help fix that problem?
Well, the best thing you can give to a family member, somebody trying to help a son or a sister or a brother or whatever, a daughter, is, don't give up on them. Obviously, this is where they can go. These are the resources. Obviously, it takes some self motivation as well,
Hmm.
you know, for them to complete this program and stick with it. But, I think encouragement and showing love and compassion is the best thing they can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I know.
also, but also they can enable them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's not, it's one thing to show compassion and love and pushing. You need to really do else. But when they do fail, you know, don't give them situations to enable them.
yeah. That's really interesting to me. Because as a teacher, I see that a lot. I'll see kids that are struggling with addictions or marijuana addictions or whatever it is that they're dealing with. I've seen kids just vaping tobacco. Since elementary school. They show up in my class and we're like, hey, let's go to the track and run a mile, and they can't even run a mile.
Yeah,
And I've actually seen them cry, and I'm like, why are you crying? And they're like, yeah, just I can't run, and I'm like, why not? Well, I've been smoking since I was like 6 years old. It's
yeah,
crazy. And a lot of times you see that enabling, like you said. People don't realize the effect that they're having on other people. They may not see smoking as a problem, but they're not realizing how this 6-year-old is abusing that, and now you're limiting their future. They may have been able to go into the military and make a career, but now their lungs are destroyed. So they can't pass a PT test. So these are things that I see. And I think it's very important. Because in my opinion, we have a major problem with the enabling piece, and that's important to focus on, I think.
well, I don't think I've ever encountered a 6 year old smoking, but
Yeah.
I've definitely seen some very preteen and 10, 11 year olds that's already vaping type
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yep.
I'm sure we're going to get into this in a moment, but the vaping is what I see that's really rough on these young
Yeah.
kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've known several students that started in elementary school.
Wow.
And it's my daughter. She was highly addicted to high potency marijuana, um, and she shares her story in my film. As you know, and I mean, it's back to the the enabling side of things. Like originally I was upset about it, because I raised my kids, don't do drugs, stay away from that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, how do I deal with this as a parent? So I was like, I'm going to punish my kid. So I started, with punishment, grounding, or things like that. But then I realized it was more than that. It was an addiction. She was started getting super sick, cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, things like that started kicking in. She lost 50 pounds in about 3.5 months. Um, so as a parent, I had to kind of take a step back and realize that maybe there's more going on here than what I realized. And the last thing I would want to do as a parent is just give more drugs to my kid. You know what I mean? But you see
100%.
that, it's crazy. You see that kind of stuff.
Well, I, talking from a dad perspective, with
Mm,
even with my kids, we all want our children to be successful, make good choices, and we pray every day that they do make good choices
yeah.
and do things, and I think just recognizing that behavior,
Hmm.
early and trying to. I think we're in a day and age with social media and the things that are on the internet and the things that are available to us online. Parents need to be on the lookout for changes in behavior for kids and realize when I know, especially in females, I feel like when they start getting that 13, 14 year olds, maybe a little bit earlier, they start having a little bit of life change with the hormones and things
Yeah.
changing, and a person's got to be able to recognize, is this a natural change versus is this a self imposed change.
Right.
Don't be afraid to go through their phones, either as parents, and it ain't necessarily spying. It's just making sure that, you
Yeah,
know, you're
protecting them.
you're looking out for their behalf. They may not realize it. It's at that moment they're going to be angry and upset, like you violated their privacy. But at the end of the day, we want to push them toward making right choices versus wrong ones.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that leadership question. As a father, and I'm actually making a new film right now called A Good Man. We're going to show the trailer in a little bit. Um, but what I'm trying to talk about is, as a father, we are leaders of our family. And we need to show our kids the right way to do things. And you know, I think if we do a better job as men in our nation, period, I think we'll see a direct correlation with drug usage going down. I think you'll see less DUIs. I think you'll see less addiction. Um, so that, to me, that's a priority. Focusing on values, morals, things like that, in this country. Um, so let's see here. Let me pull up my next question. So, what crimes are increasing that people may not realize, in Swain County or North Carolina?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest problems I'm seeing lately is people falling for scams.
Hmm.
The scams are outrageous. I mean, I don't know how many people. We get calls every day, and and I'm doing a scam presentation tomorrow at Southwestern down here in Almond. But one thing that we're seeing more and more of is these scammers are
Hmm.
impersonating law enforcement. I call them a government scam,
Hmm.
and they use fear and scare the good people that's never been in trouble before when they think they're getting a call from a law enforcement officer saying that, hey, you've missed jury duty, and if you don't pay us this much money right now, we're going to arrest you. And you'd be surprised how many people fall for that. And I've put on scam presentations all over this county trying to educate people that law enforcement will never call you and ask for money to keep you from going to jail. We'll not do it. We'll never ask for money. We never will. The clerk's office is the one that takes money in on anything. The judge may put a warrant out for you, but guess what? Just like I tell people, if we've got a warrant for you, we're coming to your house. We're beating on that door, and we're coming to get you. We're not going to
Yeah.
call and say, "Hey, if you don't give me $5,000 right now, a deputy will be at your house in 10 minutes to
Yeah.
arrest you." It don't work
Straightforward.
that way.
Yeah. It's not a tap dance, right?
It's not. And
Yeah.
if anybody ever calls and says that, hey, if you don't pay us this kind of money, or you're going to jail, hang up the phone. It's a scam every time. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with hanging up the phone and then calling the law enforcement to double check, but the one thing I've noticed about these scammers, and we've called them back and messed with them, they spoof these phone numbers online. They get a local number. Most of the time they're sitting overseas. They're using AI, the change voices to make them sound like they're a local person. But
Mm.
you know, that's probably the one of the biggest crimes I've been seeing here lately, and it feels helpless because 99% of the time there's nothing we can do if you give them money or gift cards.
Yeah. It's a bank problem at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah. They're good. I remember one time I got a phone call, and they said they were with the border patrol,
yeah.
and that they confiscated a package with my name on it at the border. Yeah, they were trying to scare me into making it sound like I like ship drugs or something crazy.
Well, they called my chief deputy with that same exact scam.
Yeah, I was like, wow, it was kind of convincing. I was like, this is, because it makes you nervous. But then I was like, no, this is a
Oh,
scam.
I mean,
So
I've seen them email people with with Swain County logos, and it's funny they'll say that they've got missed jury duty, but they'll send them a copy of an actual federal warrant. I mean, they found an actual real looking federal warrant, and they'll put like Swain County seals on it. I mean, the paperwork, if you don't know better, looks legitimate.
hmm
But you'd be surprised how many people fall for that. And I mean,
that's crazy.
just trying to get the word out, let people know that law enforcement will never call you and ask for money, period,
Hmm.
over getting out of a warrant. It don't work that way, never will work that way, and people just need to hang up the phone.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's typical. We still, you get a lot of domestics. A lot of those are drug and alcohol related.
Hmm.
We still have a few breaking and enterings, and most of them are drug related. You still have your fights and your, people drinking and driving.
Hmm.
Just the common everyday crime, and then occasionally you'll get something major, a shooting or something that we don't want to see,
Hmm.
and you know that's where training comes in handy too, because we pray to God that these things don't ever happen, but we want to be prepared if they do.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna jump into some of the good stuff here that I like to talk about, and I know you do too. You know, we're passionate about the drugs and all that stuff, so we're gonna talk about that. But before that, I'm gonna show a little commercial here. My brother has a coffee company called Army Man Coffee Company, and you know his motto is "It doesn't taste like turpentine." So if you know anything about the military, you know we sing cadence called, you know, turpentine, coffee tastes like turpentine, and stuff like that. So, but anyway, it's great coffee. I'm gonna play this little commercial real quick. We'll take a little break here, and we'll be right back.
Your cleats are tied. The whistle is close. But your legs feel heavy and your focus is still asleep. That is when the real pregame starts. Army Man Coffee Company brings bold, dependable coffee built on grit, discipline, and strength you can count on. One cup, and the locker room changes. The ball looks sharper. The field feels louder. The team gets that sunrise mission energy. Passes snap. Feet move. Confidence kicks in. Look for the soldier, the pug, and the promise. Does not taste like turpentine. From first touch to final whistle, bring the fuel that helps you play like you trained for this moment. And when the game gets tough, you do not fade. You rally. You press. You finish strong. Army Man Coffee Company. For early matches, long tournaments, and players chasing the win. Brew your strength.
All right, so that's Army Man Coffee. Pretty tasty stuff. I'm kind of a coffee snob. I don't know about you, sir.
Oh, I am too. I love coffee. I seen that and it made me want to go make another cup real quick. But
Yeah, I drink creamer. Yeah, I don't know if you drink creamer or not.
no, I drink mine just black. That's the way
Just
I
black.
like mine. I always have. So
Yeah, yeah, you're a better man than me. But you know, I actually picked up this new creamer they have last night. It's Harry Potter butterbeer
yeah,
flavor. It's a new
yeah.
flavor. It's pretty good stuff.
My wife
So
picked one of them up not too long ago. So
yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. So I've been drinking that. But yeah, if you guys looking for something new, check that out. I think it's a coffee company that he partners with out of California. It's pretty good stuff. All right, so let's get into some of the good stuff here. You know, and I guess it kind of goes with you know criminal behavior. I don't know if it's really criminal behavior, maybe in some cases, but uh, vaping. You know, the vaping problem. You know, obviously, I know you work closely with the schools. I'm a school teacher. I've taken a personal interest in this with my research and my work. And what's going on in Swain County? You know, with that.
vaping is terrible in our schools,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, we're seeing more vapes getting confiscated. It seems like in our middle school than we are at high school. And
Hmm.
we have took a few from elementary school that's in a backpack or two, but it seems like at least once a month they're gathering at least a box full of vapes that they've took out the school.
Hmm.
So I
Yep.
mean, it's obviously an issue. Um,
Yeah, and that's just the ones that get caught.
and yeah, and I'm sure that's a very small percentage of what's
Yeah.
actually out there.
Yeah, I know, like, a lot, and this is what I challenge anybody to do. You know, anybody that hears this video, um, just ask kids. You know, there's times I'll be in Walmart if I see somebody that looks like they're middle school or high school. I'll just be like, "Hey, dude, um, how many people do you think in your school vape or use some kind of smoking product?" And I can tell you this: out of three local schools, kids that I've asked, they'll tell me 75%. And a lot of people are like, "There's no way," you
But that
know.
was my first thought as well. There's no way it'd be that high, but as many vapes as we're getting, and I know we're only getting a small percentage of what's out there, I'd say your numbers are fairly accurate.
Yeah, and that's based off my research and interviews. I mean, 75%. So to me, that's very concerning because the other problem, I focus on high potency marijuana. Most people advance from one to the other. So just imagine, like you said, middle school. You're seeing the majority in middle schools. So imagine, you're in seventh grade, right? You start vaping, you love it, you use it all the time. You get more access to them. then you start having the opportunity to go to high potency marijuana. Okay, 60, 70, 80, 90% strength. Okay, now that becomes an addiction. And this is the exact story that happened to my daughter. So by the time she was a sophomore, she was just pretty much high all the time. So her grades were suffering. Her decision making was horrible. Um, she barely graduated high school. The only reason she did, and she'll tell you, is because I was a school teacher in the same school with her. So her teachers would help me down and tell me what's going on. But a lot of kids don't have that availability. They don't have parents in the school with them. Half the parents probably don't know what's going on with their kid. Stats are showing that 60% of parents right now don't know that their kids are using. So, if 60% of parents don't know, 70, 75% of kids are using, that's a scary problem to me.
It is. And I mean, out of the vapes that, we brought a box in up here the other day because we do have a law enforcement partner within the state that has capabilities of testing the THC levels.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that box that was brought up here at the end of the school year, I think it was taken over maybe the last 2 weeks of school. I think it's probably 15, 20 vapes, but, out of that box, I've probably seen 5 THC vapes, and we did take one apart and tested it just to get an idea. And when it come back 69% THC, I was appalled. I was like,
Yeah.
you gotta be kidding me.
Yep. Well, and a lot of parents, that I talk to, again, 60% of them don't even know that their kids are using. And I've had people tell me, "Oh, you're a liar. You don't know." And I'm like, "No, that's a fact." But if 60% don't know, and then on top of that, they don't know that their kids are using these super high substances, high potency, it's like, man, like we have to get involved. Parents are gonna have to get educated because they don't know the terminology. Like a cart, they're like, "What's a cart?" People don't realize, well, that's a vape with marijuana in it, right? Or shatter and dabs, or wax. This is stuff I didn't know. First time
it is wax. That stuff that comes out of them cartridges are pretty much, in my opinion, wax.
Yeah, or
Which,
some type
which
of oils.
marijuana at its purest form.
Yeah, so you got to learn the terminology, because first time I smelt it, I was like, "What is this?" And my kid, she told me, "Well, that's waxes." But she didn't tell me that was 90% strength, right? So, the very first time she started using, she was hitting high potency marijuana. It became a major addiction. So, it's very concerning to me, and I feel like we need to get a grip on it because, if we don't, the stats are showing that about 40, 42 to 44% of marijuana users will advance to harder drugs. So there's a lot of people in this country that say, we need to fix the drug problem, but they don't want to make the tough decisions to actually fix that problem. And a lot of people, they'll just say, well, that's not fair, because alcohol is worse, right? Which it is, in my opinion. But my response to them is, then why do we want to repeat history, right? But what are your thoughts on that progression, from vaping to cannabis use to harder drugs?
My personal opinion is I think high potency marijuana in youth is a gateway drug.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the grade of marijuana from when I was growing up, which I never was really, that's the smell of it gives me a headache. So
yeah,
but from my understanding, from what I've spoke with people that have used in the past, the marijuana in the '90s was, they'd smoke it and it was like 5 or 6%.
Mm-hmm.
It's very low
Mm-hmm.
grade, so it may relieve some anxiety. I'm not sure. I've never really paid attention to the science on that, but when you're talking about 70% vape and coming out of middle school, there's no way it's healthy for you or has any health benefit whatsoever.
Yeah, and I feel like that's education, the narrative side of things, because people that probably our age, when we think about marijuana, we're talking about, oh yeah, what it was back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 1 to 3%, 5%, less addictive, and nowadays, people that take medicinal marijuana, they're not taking 500 milligram gummies, right? they're taking maybe 15 milligrams, so they're medicinal is one thing that makes sense to me, but that's not what our kids are using. If you, and I'm sure you can probably talk more about this, the stuff you're finding in schools, the carts, like you said, 60%, that's not a 15 milligram,
Yeah,
this
I
is high
mean,
potency stuff, addictive stuff, right?
and then if you look at these vape cartridges that they're using, they
Hmm.
look like a nicotine vape. They're usually wrapped up with some kind of fruit or a Skittle or,
Yeah.
some type of fruity looking packaging on it, that you wouldn't
Yeah.
suspect. Our SROs are, I feel like I've got some of the best school resource officers there is to be had, and most of my school resource officers have been here for a very long time. They love their job dealing with kids, and they're quickly able to recognize the difference between a nicotine vape and a THC vape. And,
Hmm.
you know, I still feel like maybe 20% of the vapes that they do find in the school are probably THC vapes.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. And a lot of them just leave them in their car. Like I know my daughter, they may bring a nicotine vape to the school, but they're not always going to bring that THC vape to the school. So I would go out and find it in her car and stuff like that. But what was crazy to me is, I would take it away and then the next day she'd have like two or three more. It was like, where
Yeah.
are these things coming from?
And I'm pretty sure you can just order them online, and they'll come in the mail like anything else. But some
Yeah.
of the local delivery services obviously, if they smell it,
Yeah.
they will turn it in like they're supposed to. So
Yeah. And that's interesting. I didn't know that. So they're actually calling you guys and saying, hey, this is what we're picking up.
yeah,
That's good. That's good. So you guys, are you able to, like, what how do you guys hold accountable the people that shipped it to begin
well,
with?
I
Is
mean,
that something we can do, or?
sometimes we'll contact the agency of the address it's supposed to be going to. A
Mhm.
lot of times I've noticed that people use fake names. When they come to this, and
Oh wow.
they'll determine whether they just going to destroy it or whether they're going to try to do a controlled delivery,
Hmm.
which I won't speculate too much in how that works. So
Right. Interesting. Um, Now you were talking about last time we met. You were talking about how there's no age limit.
no, I had a meeting with a state agency when they were testing the potency of that vape, and there's no age limit on THC vapes, which
That's so
a
wild to me.
5-year-old can buy or whatever. It appalled me that there's no age
Yeah,
restriction.
and it's not at basically any potency level.
Yeah,
That's so crazy to me. So basically,
nicotine is, you got,
yeah,
the at the federal level, it's 18, or 21. At the state level, it's still 18 for nicotine. So,
it's so crazy to me that you could be like 10 years old and just go buy a 500 milligram.
yeah.
Imagine like a baby or something getting a hold of that. Like a kid. That's so crazy. Yeah, and I've actually talked to a lot of nurses, and they're seeing this stuff. They're seeing kids overdosing. I did a symposium a couple weeks ago and had a local nurse, and she told me they actually had a kid die from liver cirrhosis, and he was like 10 years old. So the substance abuse is really starting to affect the kids. But I think the disconnect is the public doesn't hear about it because of patient rights, HIPAA laws and things like that. So I'll be out in DC, here in 2 weeks, talking about the Green Glitch project and stuff, the Whistleblower Summit Film Festival. And that's one of the concerns I'm going to bring up, because I get, patient rights, but the public needs to be made aware, like this stuff is happening.
Well,
And
I can tell you this. Speaking with the school staff, we have 2 or 3 kids a year that end up having to get transported to the hospital for some type of,
mhm.
effect from those type of vapes.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I've had kids, you know, walk right out of the bathroom and pass out on the floor. Somebody came running in. Oh, we need help. Go out there. Sure enough, that's what it was. And I could tell by the performance. Because when we're out doing workouts and stuff, a kid that was high performing, and now all of a sudden they're just, slow.
Average.
Yeah, they're slow or below average. Um, and I'll just ask them like, "Hey, are you are you smoking?" Yep, I'm smoking. They'll just tell me. So this stuff is having an effect on people. despite what the narrative is saying out there. So that's, if you're listening, I would just say, get involved. Support the sheriff on the work that he's doing. Just get educated.
But I mean, also when they make, we're not seeing too many overdoses with harsher drugs at that age level. But I
Yeah,
mean, when you start getting in, we've seen a lot of 20s and 30s with the fentanyl overdoses, and you know, methamphetamines and fentanyl's real. You know,
yeah, yeah. And I've got something there. There was some kind of new drug coming out too. It was like like fake pills that they're starting to find in North Carolina. I can't remember what it
well,
was
I mean,
called.
you get some of these drug dealers that they've got pill presses, and they'll
Mm,
turn fentanyl into beer, into pills.
yeah, that's so
You know,
wild.
so
Yeah, and
that
you can actually I researched this. You can actually go online and purchase one of those things. It's
that
like
pill
any,
press.
yeah,
Oh yeah, you can.
that's so crazy to me that you can do that.
That's the way we used to see ecstasy too. When
Yeah,
I don't see it as much around here now as I used to back in earlier in my career. But those were usually made in a pill form.
yeah. So, you know, what advice would you give parents? Um, you know, maybe community leaders, politicians, things like that, in regards to the vaping issue with the kids.
I mean, obviously the vaping issues is uh is huge. I think one thing we need to really pay attention to is behavior at home.
Hmm.
You know, I know anymore it's easy for parents, after they've worked hard all day to want to go home and rest. And, I think it's sort of become normal for kids to come home and go straight to their bedroom and never come back
Yeah.
out. The video gaming, there's no family connection anymore like it used to be when we were growing up before we
Hmm.
had those things.
It's true.
And I think it's important for parents to know they still got to interact and be parents when they get home. Yeah, I know it's rough. You're tired. You're wore out after you've worked all day, but it's still very important to have an interaction with your kid every night or your children, and do things as a family.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice just to set the cell phones to the side and turn the video games off and be a family for at least an hour or two every single night, and
Yeah.
build
eh,
that connection. Have that
Yeah.
connection with your child.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. My daughter, she would tell you, she went through all the high potency stuff, major withdrawals. I mean, she pretty much got the worst of high potency marijuana, and she would tell you probably what helped her get clean off all that was the discussions that we had. And I've had discussions with students. I had a kid one time. Excuse me. He he's actually on my documentary. Um, on my documentary film, he came to me and said, "Hey, can I be on the film? I want to share my story." And he was at a party one time, and he remembered the words that I told him. About marijuana. How you advance from vapes to marijuana to harder drugs. 44.6%, whatever it is that advances, and he was that close to using cocaine.
No kidding.
Yep, and he remembered the words that I told him about that, and that's when he was like, you know what, I need to get help because this is starting to get out of control. So he came to me, and we actually got him the help that he needed, and that's why he wanted to share a story. So I think if 60% of parents don't know their kids are using, imagine if we just started, if 60% of parents just started having those connections, having those conversations. I think personally that there would be a direct correlation with lower crime. I think we would see lower drug usage, lower addiction. I think that's one of the most important things that we could do to fix the problem. Absolutely.
Well, Jason, through your research, answer me this, because I
Hmm.
mean, I've always been a strong believer that kids that are involved in after school activities like sports or
Hmm.
you know different clubs or whatever are less likely to get out here and get themselves in trouble than kids that you know that
Yeah.
don't have an after school activity of some sort.
Oh yeah. I think
Well,
that's Yeah, I think that's a very helpful thing. Getting kids involved. I remember when I was in the military, we used to say we're going to make our soldiers so tired they're not going to have time to go out and do something stupid over the weekend.
right,
They're going to be tired. So
and I'm sure they did that too.
yeah, they did. Oh yeah, definitely. So I've seen a lot of them scenarios, but I think keep your kids engaged. Keep them busy, and they're less likely to get into trouble. I do believe that. Um, 100%. So, I think it's just giving them goals too. Helping kids have goals.
Yeah, the goals are a big thing.
Yeah,
Helping them to, they've got to decide in that junior and senior year time frame, what their goals are moving forward as they growing into adulthood, whether they want to further their education or look for a trade skill to go in straight to work.
yeah,
And it's a big change in youth. I understand that, they're stressed out. There's a lot going on in life, but
hmm
let a family unit help with that, or let a friend help with that. They don't have to navigate that alone and do stuff that builds that anxiety to a level where they feel like they've got to do things
yeah,
to
yeah,
relieve that. Because it really it may help for a moment, or make them think it helps for a moment, but at the end of time, it's just making it worse.
yeah. And I think that's like I said, friends. I've had friends that I've had to help. When I was in the military, um, I had a friend. He was actually deployed in Iraq, and his wife was babysitting back at home. And this was back in Norfolk, Virginia. Well, she actually had a home invasion, and they shot her and paralyzed her.
Wow.
Um, from the neck down while he was deployed. So he had to come home and deal with all that stuff. And he ended up actually staying in and retiring from his career. Um, but I remember, I had to help keep him level headed.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and plus, I've seen, scenarios. I had a good friend who his wife had an affair on him while he was downrange. He deployed and, came back. And if you knew his story, he grew up in Vegas, so he used to use drugs and was highly addicted and all this kind of stuff, kind of turned his life around, ended up joining the military. Well, that bad situation led him to kind of go back to that. So he messed up. Um, and I remember, like hearing stories, we had to go to his house and you dump his liquor out. Like sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And I think us as friends, we can look out for each other, and kids. Kids can do that. Now that the kids know what I talk about in the school, they'll actually bring kids to me that are not even in my class, and they'll say, "Hey, go talk to him." And
And
I'll be
that's
like, "Who are
good
you?"
because these kids are starting to build a connection where they feel like they're comfortable enough to talk to you about situations that they're in, and that's good. They need that.
Yeah, they do need that, and
Kids need role
that's
models.
yeah, and that's my challenge. To parents, be that role model. What I'm saying, like, you know, instead of punishing your kid, I guess sometimes you need punishment, but create that safe space where they can come and talk about, hey, you know what, I think I'm getting addicted to this, so that way you can help them out, and maybe they'll bring their friends to you, so just, be open minded, have conversations with them. I think that's so important. Be a good friend. If you're a kid
That's it.
listening to this, look out for your buddies. If they're picking up addictive materials and getting that addictive personality, help them out.
But that also works as being friends. As a friend, if if you're a young person, and
hmm
you've got a friend and you're noticing their behavior start to change, don't be afraid to talk to them about it.
That's right. Yep.
Say,
Yeah.
hey, listen, what's up? Or are you starting to go down this path? Let's try to get some resources for you before it's too late.
Yep. And I think that's important. Getting helping people understand that addictive behavior before it becomes a problem.
Right.
That's important. So, yeah, that's some good stuff. All right. So, now that we talked about that, let's talk about maybe some of your work experience. Behind the badge is what I call this section. What's the hardest call that you ever had to respond to? If you can tell us
Well, I
anything
mean,
about that.
anytime you deal with death,
hmm
it's tough. I mean, unfortunately, this late in my career, I've seen kids that have passed away. You know, that's probably the hardest part.
hmm
Or dealing, it's just like dealing with loved ones that you may have lost. Saying that stuff, we're still human.
hmm
And we're still, we still have feelings and emotions, and it affects us too. And just being able to, having ways to deal with that too. Not only do we have to try to find resources as leaders for the community as they've got things going on in their life, we've also, as administrators, got to be able to do the same for our guys when they go through a traumatic situation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I,
Sometimes, law enforcement, you guys probably got some of the biggest hearts. People think you don't.
yeah, I mean, we're
Yeah.
very caring people,
Yep.
and at the end of the day, we want every one of us have the same goal, and
hmm
that's to go home at night, but at
Hmm.
the same time, we want our community safe because most of us live here.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, you want your kids to grow up in a great place, and your grandkids,
And
and
we want our kids to grow here just like we did and
yeah,
stick around. And we're starting to see more of our, our youth, once they get out of school, they move on to further education and then they go do their own thing somewhere else.
yeah. I've actually, had students that have said that to me. They're like, "I need to get out of here." There's too many problems with drugs, or there's too much. So they're noticing, they're seeing that. So how
But
we're setting that example for them is important.
I truly believe, though, as far as that goes, I think as trends go nationwide, I think that each place has got the same problems.
Oh
It
yeah,
may just be in a different variety or, a different.
yeah. Well, and everybody knows everybody out here, so
Right.
that's you hear about every little thing. Whereas in a big city, it's probably more, but you don't hear about it because you don't know anybody.
And it's
So
just meeting new people and getting out and
yeah,
exploring. I know a lot of youth nowadays like to explore and see new things and
of course.
try different things as far as uh, different lays of the land. And, I love the mountains. I love being able to still enjoy all four seasons. And,
Oh yeah.
I know a lot of youth likes the beach and the sandy shores and that beautiful side. It's
My
too hot
my
for me.
wife loves the beach. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm a
mine does
mountain
too.
goat. She loves the beach.
Yeah, mine does too.
Yeah,
I'm more of a lake man myself.
yeah, yeah. As long as I got a fishing rod in my hand, I don't care where I'm at. You could
Yeah,
put me in a swimming pool.
yeah. That's how I
um,
deal with stress. I
yeah,
fish.
yeah. It's the best way to deal with stress.
Absolutely.
So, what, well, I guess I should say, how has your faith or your personal values influenced how you lead as the county sheriff?
Well, I've got a strong faith in God. I go to church at Mount Zion Baptist Church here in Bryson City, and I've got a wonderful pastor and a wonderful church family, and I pray every single day, and I pray for guidance and to make sure I'm making decisions for the right reasons.
Hmm.
And those right reasons are are these decisions going to be the best benefit for our community in a whole?
Right on. Yeah, and
Are
that's
these decisions going to be the best decisions for our guys to make, to deal with situations at this point? But,
yeah.
the overall goal is to make sure that we make decisions based on what's going to make our community safer.
Yep. Right on. Yeah, that's good stuff. Um, I mean, that's the best thing somebody could look for in a leader. Somebody that's gonna seek the guidance from the Lord. I mean, that's
You
awesome. So, um, all right, and what advice would you give young people who want to make a difference in this community going forward?
get involved in things, be involved, you know, participate where you can. If you decide if you want to maybe follow this career path, go to your local law enforcement agency, speak to them, learn see if there's ride along programs or, my goal, and I'm still trying to get the kinks worked out, is to come up with an Explorer program just for our youth around here to, the ones between a certain age group that's interested in possibly wanting to be a leader or making a difference in the
Hmm.
community for the good, and give them that opportunity to see what it's like before they're old enough to get to do it, and use that as an opportunity to keep our local folks interested in this and maybe turn it into a job opportunity once they reach the proper age. But
That's pretty
it's
cool.
just a matter of trying to get all the kinks worked out for policies and for safety reasons and what age are we going to let them do what.
So that would
'Cause
be
I have several
through
I've got
your
several general
department.
instructors that work in here too, so they can sort of teach some of the stuff that's in the academy. Show them what it's going to look like if you go to the police academy.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's kind of like what we do with ROTC in a lot of ways. I
So
think that'd be really cool. Um, okay, so there's one more question I was going to ask you too. Regarding driving, because that's something I've been researching a lot. And I know we were talking about it the other day. You were talking about the swabs. It's like a
yeah,
pilot program you guys have. You want to talk a little
so
bit about that?
so I don't have all the ins and outs yet,
Mm,
but I know I speak with the Western North Carolina Regional DWI Task Force leader, which Miss Ellen Pitt, and she's a phenomenal. She truly cares about the DWI laws and making sure the victims get justice for people that's been injured or killed due to
hmm
driving while impaired. But she reached out to me the other day and said that they're starting a pilot program with swabs for narcotics. Because you can drive impaired on alcohol, you can drive impaired with narcotics. I mean, and the field sobriety tests are real similar and the same that they have to go through. But It's just a swab. I guess it's going to show positive or negative for what drugs. I don't know if it's a color change deal. I've not seen the swab yet. I should be
Hmm.
getting a look at that within the next month.
That's really cool.
But
Yeah, I'm
it
definitely
is
looking
kind
forward to hearing more about that. Because a lot of people don't realize. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but based off my research, it's still illegal to consume cannabis whenever you're driving in all 50 states.
so. I mean, you can be impaired on too much marijuana. It does affect your driving ability if obviously if you take too much.
Hmm. Yep. So
I've
that's
seen I've seen those DWI convictions over time. It's not I've not seen a great deal of them, but I could possibly see it leading into this type of pilot programs and research. I could possibly see leading into the more of that, trying to
yeah.
catch impaired driving off narcotic use.
Yeah, and basically like what percentage you were consuming or whatever. That'd be really cool if you guys could determine that, because then it would be kind of like alcohol, based off your body weight or whatever. So
That'd be
that's
108 and above, and
yeah, so that's probably technology coming, right? Hopefully that'll help people out. Maybe that'll cut back on a lot of the traffic issues, car crashes and stuff like that.
and that's the overall goal. I mean,
Yeah,
the goal is cut back on unnecessary car crashes and save lives. There's a lot
yeah,
of lives killed every year nationwide on car wrecks.
yeah, yeah. And I was looking at a coroner report. I was telling a little bit about this the other day, but it was out of Montgomery County, Ohio, and they analyzed data over a certain period of time from car crash deaths, and they found out that 42% of people had consumed high potency marijuana about an hour before driving. So, almost half of the drivers had that in their system. So then the University of Chicago looked at it at the national level, and they noticed, I think it was from 2018 to present, they noticed that car crash fatalities doubled with high potency marijuana in their system. So I do believe that there is a direct correlation of using and traffic safety for sure. So that'll be really cool to see how that advances over time. All right, so we're about to wrap this thing up here pretty soon. Um, let's see, a couple more good questions for you here. Talked about that. Okay, let's do some fun here, some fun stuff.
All
All
right,
right. So I didn't tell you these ones. All right. So
the surprise.
yeah, a little rapid fire. All right. So coffee or energy drinks?
Coffee.
I'm with you on that. Okay. Now I will go to energy drinks too. Now the bad thing is I'm kind of, I think I'm double dipping now. So
Yeah,
I'll get a
say I don't do energy drinks. If it's carbonated, I won't drink it. I'm a water and a coffee kind of guy.
yeah. I tried this new Monster Import. Have you had that one yet?
I don't drink soft drinks, or
Yeah.
energy drinks, but
Yeah.
I've seen my kids and they enjoy them Alanis and Monsters
Hmm.
and but I've never tried one.
Okay.
They make me sort of sick feeling.
Yeah. Well, hey, you can't go wrong with black coffee. So
Like coffee seems to work good for me. So
hey, there you go. All right. So favorite patrol vehicle you've driven?
so I started out in a 1996 Caprice that hardly ever run.
Uh huh.
So then my next car was a let's see, I had a 1997 Crown Vic. Then I got me a brand new 2004 Crown Vic, which run good. Crown Vic's probably was the best for handling as far as
Hmm.
the curves, because the Crown Vic's was one of them that if you went into a curve going toward the apex, you could really get back on the throttle hard, and it seemed like the suspension would hold on and it would keep its grip.
Hmm.
But now, probably the most aggressive and the fastest car I ever had was my first. It was the '07 Dodge Charger when it first came out.
Hmm.
It just had so much torque. The 0 to 100 was unreal,
That's crazy.
and but the handling of it was not near as good as the Crown Vic.
Are you guys going to be eventually going to the electric engines?
Probably not
Yeah.
anytime soon.
Yeah.
I'd have to.
Um,
I'd have to say the perks of that. There ain't enough docking stations or energy around here to charge that many
that's true.
vehicles,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I'd have to see the benefit of where that could work. I could possibly see that working in town, but
Yeah. Those things are
we
quick.
got too many. We got too many hills and curves around here for it to work properly, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that makes sense. Yeah, because it has fast acceleration, but maybe going up a hill that might not be.
One thing about our little county here is we've got a lot of gravel roads, a lot of washed out roads. We've got to have that all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive
That's
vehicle
true. Yeah,
to be able to get up a lot of the driveways that we have to go up.
makes sense. All right. Most underrated piece of equipment, in your opinion?
Oh goodness, probably that pen.
Yeah.
No, body cam. We got body cams, about 8 or 9 months ago. It's been phenomenal. I mean, our court cases are going through court a lot quicker now because I mean it takes the story out of it. I mean, you can see both sides when you're there, so it's
So
easy.
you guys like those?
That speeds that process up. The taser technology's come a long ways. We don't have near the the fights, I guess, that we used to have because of that.
They're like, don't tase me. It's
You
like
know,
that YouTube video, don't tase me, bro.
I will say this: we went with optics on our service weapons now with the laser optics,
Uh-huh.
and I did see your qualifying scores go up probably 5-6 points on
Interesting.
average.
That's pretty cool. All right. Biggest myth about police work?
I think the biggest myth that we deal with is we deal with a lot of, in my opinion, civil cases.
Mhm.
You have a lot of family squabbling, usually over family belongings. You'll have brothers and sisters and stuff squabbling over mom and dad stuff. And, there's nothing I can do. It's because it's civil. It has to be dealt with attorneys, but I wish families would spend more time sitting down and working through these issues other than hating each other the way they do when it comes to those properties or houses or
Mhm.
furniture pieces. Also, we're very much human too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just ordinary people that's just got a passion to serve the communities, and we've got emotions and feelings as well.
Yeah. You guys aren't RoboCop, right? Even though it'd be kind of cool to have RoboCop, but
It would be pretty neat.
it would be pretty cool. Maybe in the future, drone or not, well, with drones and all these robots and stuff they're working on, I wouldn't be surprised. Okay. If you had the attention of every parent in America for 1 minute, what would you say?
Be observant, be there, spend time with your kids. I think if each parent or family would at least spend 2 hours of their evening together to do just family things and not worry about cell phones and video games and whatever else that may go along, even eating dinner and stuff together, I think it makes you a stronger family unit. I
Absolutely.
think the stronger family unit is less enticing to get out here and do things that's going to affect your future as far as that goes. I think that's kids with a strong family unit, I feel like make better decisions.
Okay. I agree. All right, so we're gonna wrap this thing up. I'm gonna show you guys a trailer for my new film that'll be coming out in early 2027, and then I have one more question for you, Sheriff. So, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna pop this thing on.
He taught us that, it's not about me. It's about, who we can help as far as going out and doing for others.
Every generation asks the same question. What is it that makes a man a good man? Is it strength? Is it courage? Is it sacrifice? Some men were shown how to become good men. Others had to discover it on their own.
We need to take a stand for something. Take a stand for the truth. Get back to having good morals within our family, within our communities, our schools, our workplaces.
In a world searching for stronger men, perhaps what we really need are better men. Because history doesn't remember perfect men. It remembers good men.
Imagine the impact we could have on people by just changing the way we speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and as men, I feel like we need to do a better job at that. I don't know about you, but that's what I think.
Oh yeah. And not only in our words we say, but in how we say it.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
All right. So, one more question for you.
All
You,
right.
you probably already know what it is.
Maybe.
What do you think is a good man? What defines a good man?
I think your good character stands on your integrity and your honesty and being truthful and just straight up.
Okay.
Being loving and compassionate, but also, strong to your values and passionate about things you believe in.
Outstanding. So that pretty much wraps up our interview. And hey, Sheriff, thank you so much for coming on the show here. And I'm excited to see, the feedback and stuff like that we're going to get from the community. And hey, if you're watching this, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better person here to lead your county in law enforcement. And hopefully we'll see you around for a long time, Sheriff.
Absolutely. If we get a lot of questions, something I go into a follow up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to get you back on the show sometime. As if there's any new technology that comes out, any updates that you feel are important for the community,
Absolutely.
I'd love to support you on that. And I appreciate you supporting what I do as well. And it's a great thing.
Just one last thing to remember. People that work together for the right reasons make things stronger.
That's right. I 100% agree. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? Or
Exactly.
as Bob the Builder would say, working together gets the job done.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you allowing me to be on here.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, and enjoy your week, and be safe out there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir. Yep.
Bye.